Sometimes miracles happen when you least expect them, but they require someone willing to risk everything to make them possible. Jackson Hendricks was just 14 years old when his world turned upside down. An eighth grader who excelled in science and played drums in a rock band, Jackson had dreams as big as his talent. But on July 4, 2015, those dreams seemed to crumble when he felt something that would change his life forever, a lump in his abdomen. What Jackson didn't know was that he was about to face one of the rarest and most aggressive cancers known to medicine, fibrolamellar hepatocellular carcinoma, or simply fibro. This isn't your typical liver cancer. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing, striking young, healthy people without warning. With only 200 new cases diagnosed worldwide each year, most doctors go their entire careers without seeing it. It's a cancer that doesn't follow the rules, doesn't respond to traditional treatments, and often leaves families with more questions than answers. By his 15th birthday, Jackson would receive news that no parent should ever hear. Their child has an incurable cancer. The tumor in his liver was the size of a softball, and it was spreading like wildfire through his young body. Local doctors shook their heads, offering only months to live and little hope for recovery. But Jackson's story isn't just about cancer. It's about the power of never giving up, the strength of family love, and most importantly, it's about a surgeon known in the medical community as Dr. Miracle, Dr. Tom Cato. A man whose hands moved with the precision of an artist and the speed of lightning, who had built his reputation by taking on the impossible cases that other surgeons wouldn't touch. This is a story that will take you from the depths of despair to the heights of hope. It's about a teenage boy who refused to let cancer define his future, parents who traveled across the country searching for answers, and a medical team that believed in miracles when science said there were none left to give. If you've ever felt like giving up, if you've ever faced impossible odds, or if you simply believe in the power of human resilience, this story will touch your heart and remind you that sometimes the greatest battles produce the most extraordinary victories. Subscribe now and join us on this incredible journey of courage, determination, and medical miracles. The summer of 2015 should have been perfect for the Hendricks family. Christopher and Carol had planned the ultimate vacation to Disneyland for Jackson, their brilliant eighth grader who seemed destined for greatness. At 14, Jackson wasn't your typical teenager. While his classmates spent hours on video games, he was conducting science experiments in the family garage and practicing complex drum solos late into the night. Jackson was always different, Carol would later recall, her voice filled with both pride and pain. He asked questions that made his teachers think twice, and his passion for learning was infectious. We knew he was special. The Disneyland trip was everything they had hoped for. Jackson's laughter echoed through the park as he rode every roller coaster twice, his eyes bright with the wonder that only comes from being young and believing the world is full of endless possibilities. But as they returned home and July 4th approached, something began to change. It started subtly. Jackson, usually full of energy, began complaining of fatigue. He pushed through it initially, attributing it to the busy vacation schedule. But then came the night that changed everything. As Jackson was getting ready for bed, he felt something that shouldn't have been there, a hard lump in his abdomen. "Mom, there's something weird here," Jackson called out, his voice carrying a note of concern that made Carol's maternal instincts kick into high gear. When she felt the lump, her world stopped spinning. It was large, hard, and definitely not supposed to be there. The next morning, Christopher and Carol rushed Jackson to their local hospital in Memphis. The emergency room doctor, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, had seen many cases in her 15 years of practice, but something about Jackson's presentation worried her deeply. The combination of the abdominal mass, his recent fatigue, and his previously perfect health created a pattern that made her stomach clench with dread. "Let's get some imaging done right away," Dr. Mitchell ordered, her professional calm masking the concern that was building inside her. She had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, they were screaming that something was very wrong. The CT scan results came back faster than anyone wanted. Dr. Mitchell stared at the images on her computer screen, hoping she was misreading what she saw. But there was no denying it. A massive tumor, roughly the size of a softball, was growing on the right side of Jackson's liver. The mass was aggressive, well-defined, and unlike anything she had seen in someone so young. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, the Hendricks family sat in the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Jackson tried to appear brave, but his parents could see the fear flickering in his eyes. Christopher, a nurse himself, knew that the longer they waited, the worse the news was likely to be. When Dr. Mitchell finally emerged with the radiologist, her expression told the story before her words could. The next few minutes would blur together in the family's memory, words like mass, liver, biopsy, and oncology floating through the air like daggers aimed at their hearts. The diagnosis was just the beginning. What they would discover about Jackson's condition would challenge everything the medical community thought they knew about treating young cancer patients. July 9, 2015, Jackson's 15th birthday. Instead of cake and celebration, the Hendricks family found themselves sitting in an oncology office, waiting to hear words that would either give them hope or shatter their world completely. Dr. Robert Chun, the oncologist, had been practicing for over 20 years. He had delivered thousands of diagnoses, both good and bad, but something about telling a teenager on his birthday that he had cancer felt particularly cruel. As he reviewed Jackson's biopsy results one final time, he took a deep breath and prepared to change a family's life forever. "The results confirm our suspicions," Dr. Chin began, his voice measured and professional. "Jackson has fibrolamellar hepatocellular carcinoma. We call it FLC or fibro for short. It's extremely rare, especially in someone his age." Carol felt the room spin around her. Christopher reached for her hand, his medical training telling him to ask the right questions while his father's heart was breaking into pieces. "What does this mean?" Christopher managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chen explained that FLC was unlike typical liver cancers. It primarily affected young, healthy individuals between the ages of 15 and 35, people who had never had liver disease or any risk factors. The tumor Jackson had was not only massive, but had likely been growing for months, without symptoms. "The challenge with FLC," Dr. Chin continued, "is that it's incredibly aggressive and often doesn't respond well to traditional chemotherapy. By the time we catch it, it's usually advanced." Jackson, despite being the patient, found himself asking the most direct question. "Am I going to die?" The silence that followed felt eternal. Dr. Chin looked at this remarkable young man, a teenager who was asking the question that adults struggled to voice, and felt the weight of honesty battling with hope. "Jackson, I won't lie to you. This is a very serious cancer. Without treatment, the prognosis is poor. With treatment, we're looking at extending your life, hopefully by several years. But I want to be clear, this type of cancer is extremely difficult to cure." The word cure hung in the air like a challenge. Carol's tears flowed freely now, while Christopher struggled to process the medical implications of what they were hearing. 3 years. Maybe, if they were lucky. But Jackson surprised everyone in that room. Instead of breaking down, instead of giving in to fear, he straightened his shoulders and looked Dr. Chin directly in the eyes. "What do we do first?" he asked. Dr. Chin outlined the treatment plan. They would start with aggressive chemotherapy, hoping to shrink the tumor enough to make surgery possible. The goal was to buy time and create opportunities. It wasn't ideal, but it was their best shot. The chemotherapy regimen would be brutal. Jackson would receive high doses of drugs designed to poison cancer cells, but which would also devastate his healthy cells. Hair loss, severe weight loss, nausea, and fatigue would become his constant companions. The treatment would likely interfere with school, with his music, with everything that made Jackson who he was. As they left the oncology office that day, Jackson turned to his parents with a determination that surprised them both. "This isn't how my story ends," he said simply. "I don't know how I know that, but I do." Carol and Christopher exchanged glances, seeing in their son a strength they didn't know existed. They had raised a fighter, and now that fighter was going to need every ounce of courage he possessed. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a family gathering their strength for the battle of their lives. Jackson stared out the window, watching Memphis pass by, already planning how he would beat the odds that had just been stacked against him. The chemotherapy would test Jackson's resolve in ways no 15-year-old should ever have to endure, but it would also reveal the depth of his character and the power of community support. August 2015 marked the beginning of Jackson's war against cancer. The chemotherapy suite at Memphis Children's Hospital became his second home, a place where hope and despair danced together in 4 tubes and beeping machines. On his first day of treatment, Jackson walked into the oncology unit with a determination that impressed even the most experienced nurses. Nurse Jennifer Adams, who had been working in pediatric oncology for 12 years, still remembers the moment Jackson introduced himself to every patient in the waiting room. "Hi, I'm Jackson," he said to a young girl receiving treatment nearby. "I'm here to beat cancer. What's your superpower going to be?" The approach was unconventional, but it worked. Jackson transformed the treatment room from a place of quiet suffering into a community of warriors. He brought his portable drum kit to sessions, playing softly for other patients when they felt scared or alone. But chemotherapy is an unforgiving opponent. The drugs designed to kill his cancer didn't discriminate. They attacked every fast-growing cell in his body. Within weeks, Jackson's thick brown hair began falling out in clumps. His weight dropped dramatically, from a healthy 140 pounds to a frightening 109 pounds on his 5 feet 6 inches frame. "I looked like a skeleton," Jackson would later recall. "But I kept telling myself that hair grows back and weight can be gained. What matters is that the cancer was getting smaller." The side effects were brutal beyond what anyone had prepared him for. Painful blisters developed on his hands and feet, making simple tasks like writing or walking excruciating. Some days, the nausea was so severe that he couldn't keep water down, let alone food. Carol quit her job to become Jackson's full-time caregiver, sleeping on a fold-out chair beside his hospital bed during his worst days. Christopher continued working, but spent every free moment researching FLC, reaching out to specialists, and looking for any glimmer of hope in the medical literature. "The hardest part wasn't the physical pain," Carol remembers. "It was watching our vibrant, energetic son become so weak that he needed a wheelchair to get around school. But even then, his spirit never broke." Jackson's high school, Central High School in Memphis, rallied around their young warrior in ways that restored faith in humanity. Teachers modified assignments to accommodate his treatment schedule. His bandmates visited regularly, bringing their instruments to play quiet concerts in his hospital room. The school's science department even set up a special tutoring program so Jackson could continue his studies despite missing months of classes. "My teachers were incredible," Jackson says. "Mrs. Patterson, my biology teacher, would meet with me on Saturday mornings when I felt well enough. She said I was still going to need that knowledge to become a doctor someday, and she wasn't going to let cancer interfere with my education." But by September 2015, the medical news was mixed. The good news was that the tumor had shrunk slightly. The chemotherapy was having some effect. The challenging news was that the cancer had spread to Jackson's portal vein, the crucial blood vessel that connects the liver to the intestines. Dr. Chin explained the gravity of this development. When FLC invades the portal vein, it changes everything. The tumor is essentially cutting off blood supply to vital areas of the liver. This makes surgical removal much more complicated, if not impossible. Local surgeons reviewed Jackson's case and declared it inoperable. The tumor was too large, too integrated into critical blood vessels, and too risky to attempt removal. Instead, they recommended a procedure called chemoembolization, essentially cutting off the blood supply to the tumor in hopes of starving it to death. The radiologist scheduled to perform the procedure, Dr. Mark Stevens, was honest about the risks. "There's a 25% chance Jackson won't survive this procedure," he told the family bluntly. The tumor's location and the state of his portal vein make this extremely dangerous. Those odds weren't good enough for the Hendricks family. They had watched their son fight with everything he had, and they weren't about to risk losing him to a procedure that offered only a 1 in 4 chance of survival. "We're not gambling with Jackson's life," Christopher declared. "There has to be someone somewhere who can do better than that." The search for a surgeon willing to take on Jackson's impossible case would lead the family on a journey across the country, testing their faith and determination at every turn. October 2015 found the Hendricks family in uncharted territory. With local doctors saying Jackson's case was too risky to operate on, they began what felt like an impossible quest, finding a surgeon willing to attempt what others had declared impossible. Christopher and Carol, both healthcare professionals themselves, understood the medical complexities of Jackson's case better than most families would. But understanding the problem and finding a solution were two very different challenges. They spent countless hours researching FLC specialists, reading medical journals, and reaching out to cancer centers across the country. Their first major breakthrough came through a connection at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis. A colleague suggested they contact MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, one of the most prestigious cancer treatment facilities in the world. The appointment at MD Anderson in November 2015 felt like stepping into a different universe of medical care. The facility buzzed with cutting-edge technology and world-renowned specialists. Dr. Maria Gonzalez, a hepatic oncologist with extensive experience in rare liver cancers, reviewed Jackson's case with the kind of thoroughness that gave the family their first real sense of hope in months. FLC is tricky, Dr. Gonzalez explained during their consultation. It's so rare that most surgeons see maybe 1 or 2 cases in their entire careers. But we've treated several patients with this condition, and we understand its patterns better than most. However, the imaging at MD Anderson revealed devastating news. A second tumor had appeared on the left side of Jackson's liver. The cancer was not only persistent but aggressive, spreading despite the months of chemotherapy. Dr. Gonzalez made a calculated decision. "We can remove the smaller tumor on the left side," she told the family. "This will give us tissue samples for further analysis and potentially slow the progression. However, the main tumor on the right side is too large and too integrated into the portal vein system. Attempting to remove it could be fatal." The surgery to remove the left side tumor was Jackson's first major operation. As he was wheeled into the operating room at MD Anderson, he squeezed his mother's hand and said, "This is just the warm-up act. The real show comes later." The procedure was successful from a technical standpoint. The surgical team removed the secondary tumor completely, and Jackson's recovery was smooth. But Dr. Gonzalez's post-operative assessment was sobering. "The pathology confirms that this is an aggressive form of FLC," she explained. "We're going to prescribe a more intensive chemotherapy regimen, followed by Y90 radiation therapy. The goal is to shrink the main tumor to a size where surgery might become possible." Y90 radiation therapy was a cutting-edge treatment that involved inserting tiny radioactive beads directly into the tumor's blood supply. It was precise, powerful, and offered hope where traditional radiation had failed. But it was also experimental for FLC patients, with limited data on long-term effectiveness. Meanwhile, Christopher and Carol continued their search for a surgeon who might be willing to attempt the impossible. They reached out to specialists at Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, and UCLA. Most responses were polite but discouraging. Jackson's case was simply too complex, too risky. Then came the conversation that changed everything. Dr. Stephen Martinez at UCLA reviewed Jackson's files and imaging studies. After a long pause, he said something the family will never forget. "There's one surgeon who might be willing to take this on. His name is Dr. Tom Cato at Columbia University Medical Center in New York. He's got a reputation for taking on cases that other surgeons won't touch. If anyone can help Jackson, it's him." Dr. Martinez continued, "I have to warn you, though, Dr. Cato is incredibly selective about his cases. He only operates when he believes there's a real chance of success. But if he agrees to take Jackson on, you'll be in the best hands possible." The recommendation came with a nickname that sent chills down Carol's spine. Other doctors called him Dr. Miracle. Not because he believed in miracles, but because he had a track record of making them happen. As they prepared to reach out to Dr. Cato, Jackson was back in Memphis, enduring the intense chemotherapy and Y90 treatments prescribed by MD Anderson. His body was being pushed to its limits, but his spirit remained unbroken. "I heard about this surgeon they call Dr. Miracle," Jackson told his parents one evening. "I think that sounds like exactly who we need to meet." The family's journey to New York would either represent their greatest hope or their final desperate attempt to save Jackson's life. Dr. Tom Cato's reputation preceded him like a legend whispered in medical schools across the country. At Columbia University Medical Center in New York, he was known simply as Dr. Miracle, a title earned through years of successfully performing surgeries that other surgeons deemed impossible. Standing at 5 feet 8 inches with silver-streaked hair and hands that moved with the precision of a master pianist, Dr. Cato had dedicated his career to hepatobiliary surgery, the incredibly complex field of liver and bile duct operations. His colleagues often said he could perform surgery blindfolded. Such was his understanding of liver anatomy and his intuitive feel for the delicate dance of surgical intervention. When Jackson's case file landed on Dr. Cato's desk in early 2016, he spent hours studying every image, every report, every detail of the young man's medical journey. FLC cases fascinated him because they broke all the traditional rules of liver cancer. They occurred in healthy young people, grew aggressively, and often presented surgical challenges that pushed the boundaries of what was medically possible. This is exactly the kind of case I became a surgeon to handle, Dr. Cato told his surgical team during their weekly complex case review. This young man has been told his cancer is inoperable, but I think we can prove otherwise. Dr. Cato's confidence wasn't born from arrogance, it came from experience. Over his 20-year career, he had developed innovative surgical techniques specifically for complex liver resections. He had pioneered methods for reconstructing portal veins and had successfully operated on tumors that other surgeons wouldn't even attempt to biopsy. When the Hendricks family flew to New York in September 2016, they carried with them the hopes of an entire Memphis community. Word of Jackson's fight had spread throughout their hometown, and fundraisers had been organized to help cover the astronomical costs of traveling to New York for treatment. The whole city was behind Jackson, remembers Coach Mike Thompson, Jackson's middle school science teacher. We had bake sales, benefit concerts, and even a community 5K run. Everyone wanted to help this kid who had inspired so many people with his courage. The meeting with Dr. Cato was unlike any medical consultation the family had experienced. Instead of focusing on the risks and limitations, Dr. Cato talked about possibilities and solutions. I've reviewed Jackson's case extensively, Dr. Cato began, his calm confidence immediately putting the family at ease. What I see is a young man who has responded well to chemotherapy. The tumor has stabilized, which tells me it's not as aggressive as we initially thought. This creates what I call the perfect surgical window. Dr. Cato explained his approach using detailed anatomical drawings and 3D computer models. The surgery would be incredibly complex, requiring him to remove not just the tumor, but also Jackson's gallbladder, reconstruct his bile ducts, and create a new pathway for blood flow using a vein graft from Jackson's neck. The procedure will take approximately 12 to 14 hours, Dr. Cato continued. We'll need to essentially rebuild part of Jackson's liver anatomy. It's complex, but it's absolutely doable. What struck the family most was Dr. Cato's genuine connection with Jackson. Rather than talking to the parents about the patient, he spoke directly to Jackson, treating him as a partner in the decision-making process. Jackson, I want you to understand exactly what we're going to do, Dr. Cato said. This isn't going to be easy, and your recovery will be challenging. But I believe we can remove this tumor completely and give you the chance for a normal life. The question is, are you ready to fight this battle with me? Jackson's response was immediate and clear. Doctor, I've been ready for this fight since day one. When do we start? The surgery was scheduled for October 31st, 2016, Halloween. As Jackson was being prepared for the operation, he made a joke that would become legendary among the nursing staff. I guess I'm getting the ultimate Halloween treat, a chance at life. Dr. Cato's surgical team prepared for what they knew would be one of the most challenging operations of their careers. The complexity of Jackson's case required not just technical skill, but also innovative problem-solving and the ability to adapt in real time as unexpected challenges arose during the procedure. October 31st, 2016 would become the day that defined not just Jackson's future, but also Dr. Cato's reputation as a surgeon who could truly work miracles. October 31st, 2016, 6 a.m. The preoperative area at Columbia University Medical Center buzzed with controlled energy as Dr. Cato's surgical team prepared for what everyone knew would be an extraordinary day. The Halloween decorations throughout the hospital added a surreal backdrop to what was about to become one of the most complex liver surgeries in the institution's history. Jackson arrived that morning with a calmness that surprised even his parents. As he was wheeled toward the operating room, he looked up at Dr. Cato and said, "Dr. Miracle, I'm ready for my miracle." Dr. Cato's surgical team consisted of 8 specialists. 2 liver surgeons, an anesthesiologist, a perfusionist, 2 surgical nurses, a resident, and a fellow. Each had been briefed extensively on the procedure's complexity, but even they underestimated what they were about to witness. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Cato announced as Jackson was anesthetized, "today we're going to rewrite the textbook on FLC surgery. This young man has given us his trust, and we're going to honor that with the best work of our careers." The first 3 hours were spent carefully exposing Jackson's liver and assessing the tumor's exact boundaries. What Dr. Cato found was both better and worse than the imaging had suggested. The good news was that the tumor hadn't spread to any new locations. The challenging news was that it had wrapped around the portal vein more extensively than expected. "We're going to need the jugular vein graft sooner than planned," Dr. Cato informed his team. The procedure required harvesting a section of Jackson's internal jugular vein from his neck to create a bypass around the blocked portal vein, essentially building a new highway for blood flow to his liver. Dr. Sarah Kim, the vascular surgeon assisting with the procedure, carefully removed the needed section of vein while Dr. Cato continued working on isolating the tumor. The coordination required was like a symphony, with each team member playing their part in perfect harmony. Hour 6 brought the most critical moment of the surgery. Dr. Cato began the actual tumor removal, carefully dissecting tissue that had been growing for over a year. Every cut had to be precise. Too conservative and cancer cells would remain, too aggressive and vital liver tissue would be lost. Tumors coming out beautifully, Dr. Cato announced to the team. Jackson's body is responding exactly as we hoped. But hour 8 brought an unexpected complication. As Dr. Cato removed the tumor, they discovered that Jackson's bile ducts had been more severely affected than imaging had shown. Instead of a simple reconstruction, they would need to create an entirely new pathway for bile drainage. This is where experience matters, Dr. Cato said calmly, his hands never pausing in their precise movements. We're going to reroute his entire biliary system. It's complex, but it's necessary for long-term success. The bile duct reconstruction took another 4 hours, requiring Dr. Cato to essentially rebuild Jackson's internal plumbing system. Each connection had to be perfect. Any leak could result in life-threatening complications. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, Christopher and Carol sat with Jackson's extended family and friends who had flown in from Memphis. Updates came every 2 hours from the surgical coordinator, but the length of the procedure was nerve-wracking. 14 hours, Carol whispered to Christopher as the clock approached 8 p.m. He's been under anesthesia for 14 hours. Hour 12 brought the vascular reconstruction. Dr. Cato carefully connected the jugular vein graft to Jackson's portal system, creating a new pathway for blood flow that bypassed the area where the tumor had been growing. This was perhaps the most technically demanding part of the entire procedure. Blood flow looks perfect, announced Dr. Kim as they tested the new vascular connections. The graft is working beautifully. Finally, after 13 hours and 47 minutes, Dr. Cato made the announcement that everyone had been waiting to hear. Tumor is completely removed. All margins are clear. Reconstruction is complete and functioning perfectly. The pathology report would later confirm what Dr. Cato already knew. They had achieved what's called an R0 resection, meaning no cancer cells were left behind. The tumor, which had seemed inoperable to so many other surgeons, was completely gone. As Jackson was wheeled into the ICU, still unconscious but stable, Dr. Cato met with the family. His surgical scrubs were stained with the evidence of the day's work, but his eyes shone with the satisfaction of a job well done. The surgery was a complete success, he told the assembled group. We removed the entire tumor, reconstructed his bile ducts, and created a new blood pathway. Jackson is going to have a long recovery, but from a surgical standpoint, he's cured. Jackson's recovery would prove to be just as remarkable as the surgery that saved his life, but it would also reveal the true character of a young man who had faced death and emerged victorious. When Jackson Hendricks woke up in the ICU on November 1, 2016, the first thing he saw were nurses dressed as cats, witches, and superheroes, leftover Halloween costumes from the previous day's festivities. Through the haze of anesthesia and pain medication, he managed to crack a smile and whisper, "Best Halloween ever." The recovery from such an extensive surgery was going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Jackson's body had endured nearly 14 hours of complex reconstruction, and every system needed time to heal and adapt to its new configuration. The first week was critical. Any complications could undo all of Dr. Cato's meticulous work. Jackson's recovery was textbook perfect, remembers Dr. Linda Martinez, the ICU physician who oversaw his post-operative care. Despite the complexity of his surgery, he healed with the resilience of someone half his age. It was remarkable to watch. By day 3, Jackson was sitting up in bed, asking for his drumsticks so he could practice finger exercises. By day 7, he was walking the halls of the ICU, encouraging other patients and joking with the nursing staff. His positive attitude became infectious throughout the ward. The pathology results, when they came back, confirmed everyone's greatest hopes. The tumor was completely gone, with clear margins all around. More importantly, there was no evidence of cancer spread to any other organs. After more than a year of fighting this devastating disease, Jackson was officially cancer-free. Dr. Cato visited Jackson every day during his 2-week hospital stay, monitoring not just his physical recovery, but also his emotional adjustment to life after cancer. These daily visits revealed the depth of connection that had developed between the surgeon and his young patient. Jackson taught me as much as I taught him, Dr. Cato reflects. His courage in the face of impossible odds reminded me why I became a surgeon in the first place. He never once complained, never once gave up hope. He just kept fighting with a smile on his face. The flight back to Memphis was emotional for the entire family. Jackson carried with him not just a clean bill of health, but also a new perspective on life and its possibilities. The scared 14-year-old who had felt that first lump in his abdomen had been transformed into a confident 16-year-old who understood the value of every day. Back in Memphis, the community celebration was overwhelming. Jackson's high school organized a welcome-back assembly where he was greeted by hundreds of students, teachers, and community members who had supported him throughout his journey. The local news station ran a feature story titled, "The Boy Who Beat the Odds." But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Jackson returned to his drum kit for the first time since his surgery. His hands, once blistered and weak from chemotherapy, moved across the drums with renewed strength and purpose. The music he played that day was different, deeper, more mature, filled with the wisdom that comes only from facing mortality and emerging victorious. Music sounds different when you've almost lost the ability to make it, Jackson says. Every note feels like a gift. Jackson's academic performance upon returning to school was nothing short of extraordinary. The young man who had missed months of classes due to treatment not only caught up with his peers, but excelled beyond expectations. He was inducted into the National Honor Society and began taking advanced placement courses in preparation for college. His college applications, when the time came, told a story unlike any admissions committee had ever read. Jackson wrote about resilience, about the power of community support, and about his dream of becoming a doctor, so he could give other young cancer patients the same hope that Dr. Cato had given him. "I want to be someone's Dr. Miracle," Jackson wrote in his personal statement. "I want to look a scared teenager in the eyes and tell them that their story doesn't have to end with cancer. I learned that from the best." The oncologist who had originally given Jackson a 3-year prognosis watched in amazement as his young patient not only survived but thrived. The lesson was clear: statistics are just numbers, but the human spirit is immeasurable. Jackson's story became a beacon of hope for other families facing similar diagnoses, proving that sometimes the greatest miracles happen when courage meets exceptional medical care. Today, Jackson Hendricks is a pre-med student at a prestigious university, carrying a 3.8 GPA and volunteering at the local children's hospital. The scared 8th grader who once felt a lump in his abdomen has become a young man with a mission: to heal others the way he was healed. Dr. Tom Cato continues to practice at Columbia University Medical Center, where he has established a specialized program for treating fibrolamellar hepatocellular carcinoma. Jackson's case has become a teaching tool for medical students and surgical residents, demonstrating that inoperable is sometimes just another word for requires exceptional skill. The Hendricks family's journey taught them that miracles don't happen by accident. They happen when families refuse to give up, communities rally in support, and medical professionals push beyond the boundaries of what's considered possible. Carol Hendricks now works with a patient advocacy group, helping other families navigate the complex world of rare cancer treatment. She has personally referred dozens of families to Dr. Cato, earning him what she calls rock star status in the fibro community. Jackson's story reminds us that behind every medical statistic is a human being with dreams, hopes, and the potential for extraordinary courage. His journey from a terminal diagnosis to a thriving future proves that sometimes the greatest battles produce the most beautiful victories. If you're facing your own impossible battle, remember Jackson's words: "This isn't how my story ends." Sometimes the most powerful medicine isn't found in a pill or a procedure. It's found in the refusal to surrender hope. Take a moment to appreciate the miracle of each day you've been given. Share Jackson's story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember that sometimes, when courage meets exceptional care, the impossible becomes inevitable. Jackson Hendricks didn't just beat cancer. He transformed his experience into a gift for others facing similar battles. That's the true miracle of his story.